All characters and events described in this story are fictitious. Any similarities with real people or situations are purely coincidental. Please do not judge strictly. Every author was once a beginner. Write in the comments what city you are from and are listening to this story of mine. Don't forget to like, share your life experiences, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next exciting story. New York City sparkled outside the penthouse windows on 57th Street, where the crowd in tuxedos and evening gowns buzzed. The charity evening for children's hospitals was in full swing, the clinking of glasses, muffled jazz, and the laughter of Manhattan's elite. James Carter stood at the bar, sipping a whiskey and soda, and watched with a slight smile. He was 35 and looked like a man who knew what he wanted. A dark blue suit that fit perfectly, blonde hair neatly combed back, and a mixture of confidence and weariness in his blue eyes. Co-owner of the Bright Horizon advertising agency, he was used to such events, but today he felt a little out of place. "You look like you want to run away," said a voice nearby. James turned. Standing in front of him was Tom Haley, his business partner and best friend since college. Tom was taller, broader-shouldered, with dark hair and a perpetual grin that made him look like a used car salesman, although he was damn good at making deals. "Maybe I would," James replied, taking a sip. "These evenings are like dancing with sharks. You smile, nod, and in your head you count how many contracts you can squeeze out of this crowd." Tom laughed, slapping him on the shoulder. "You're too serious for that, old man. Relax. We've already raised $500,000 for hospitals, and you're still in work mode. Maybe have something stronger." "This is stronger." James raised his glass. "If I switch to pure whiskey, I'll start dancing on the table, and no one wants that." "Oh, I would pay to see this," Tom winked, but then his gaze moved somewhere behind James. "By the way, who is that blonde at the window? She's been staring here all evening." James turned around, trying not to look too interested. A woman stood at the panoramic window, her back to the glass. Tall, in a tight black dress with a cutout at the back, she was holding a glass of champagne and talking to a balding man in a tuxedo. Her long blonde hair fell in waves, and her laughter ringing, almost theatrical, echoed throughout the hall. She looked like she knew she was being watched and was enjoying it. "I don't know," James said, looking away. "Probably someone's wife or another model who was invited to be an entourage." "It's a model for sure," Tom nodded. "But she's not with someone. She's alone. And judging by the way she's looking sideways here, she's attracted to you." "You imagined it," James rolled his eyes, but the corner of his lips twitched. "I came here for business, not for flirting." "Who said it can't be combined?" Tom nudged him with his elbow. "Go say hello, or I'll do it for you." "Don't you dare." James gave him a stern look, but Tom had already raised his hand, as if he was going to wave to the stranger. James grabbed his wrist. "You are unbearable." "You're boring," Tom retorted. "Okay, I'm off to get another cocktail. But if you don't come to her in 5 minutes, I'll come back and make a scene for you." James shook his head as he watched Tom disappear into the crowd. He finished his whiskey and set the glass on the counter, wondering if he should even move. The evening had been long, and the conversations with potential clients had already exhausted him. But something about this woman, maybe her confident posture or the way she laughed, caught him. He wasn't the type to go on adventures, but today, damn it, why not? He straightened his jacket and headed towards the window, trying not to look too determined. The crowd parted for him, someone nodded, someone clapped him on the shoulder, but he kept his gaze on her. When he got closer, the balding man had already moved away, and she stood alone, looking at the city lights behind the glass. "Nice view," James said, stopping next to him and nodding at the New York skyline. She turned to him, and he saw her face for the first time. Green eyes, sharp cheekbones, a slight smile that seemed both sincere and mocking. She was beautiful, not just attractive, but beautiful in a way that was almost disconcerting. "View?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or do you mean something else?" James almost choked in surprise, but quickly pulled himself together. "The view outside the window, of course," he smiled. though you seem to be doing a good job of keeping attention away from him." She laughed the same ringing laugh that he had heard before. "Nice try," she said, taking a sip of champagne, "but I've heard better compliments." "Then I should try again." He crossed his arms, looking at her with interest. "My name is James. What about you?" "Emily," she answered, holding out her hand. Her fingers were slender and perfectly manicured, and she squeezed his palm lightly before letting go. "Are you here for the sake of sick children or to show off in a tuxedo?" "Both," he shrugged. "And you?" "I'm here because I love champagne," she raised her glass, "and because I like to watch rich people pretend to be kind." James chuckled. Her directness was refreshing in a world where everyone spoke in hints. She cut the truth in the face. "You are a cynic, Emily," he said, "but it seems to suit you. And you, James, seem to be one of those who are used to controlling everything." She tilted her head, studying him. "Did you guess it?" "Maybe." He didn't argue. "But I don't mind being surprised." "Then you're lucky," she smiled wider. "I'm full of surprises." They fell silent, looking at each other. Outside the window, skyscrapers shone, reflected in the glass, and in the hall, jazz was replaced by something slower. James felt the tension of the evening recede, giving way to something new light, almost playful. "So what do you do, James?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Besides, do you compliment strangers?" "I work in advertising," he answered. "Co-owner of the agency. We help brands tell their stories." "Oh, advertiser," she narrowed her eyes. "So you are a master at selling what people don't want." "Rather, I help them understand what they want," he smiled. "And you? What do you do?" "I'm a former model," she said casually, as if it didn't matter. "Now I'm just living. I travel, I go to parties like this. Sometimes I help friends with their projects." "Former model?" he asked again. "You look like you could walk on the catwalk right now." "Thank you." She looked at him with a slight challenge. "But I'm tired of being a dummy. I prefer to be alive." "What is it like to be alive?" he asked, genuinely interested. "It means doing what you want," she shrugged. "Don't look at the rules." "Do you, James, ever break the rules?" He thought about it. His life was built according to a clear plan: business, goals, responsibility. Even this evening was part of the strategy to strengthen connections, find new clients. But looking at Emily, he suddenly realized that he didn't want to think about work right now. "Not often," he admitted, "but maybe today is a good day to start." She laughed again, and the sound made him feel lighter. "Then let's start with something simple," she said, finishing the champagne and putting the glass on the windowsill. "Will you dance with me?" James froze. He hadn't danced since. Hell, he couldn't even remember the last time. But it seemed impossible to refuse her offer. "I'm not the best dancer," he warned, holding out his hand. "Me too." She took his hand, and her fingers were unexpectedly warm. "But we break the rules, right?" They walked out to the middle of the hall, where couples were already circling. The music was slow, with soft saxophone notes, and James felt uneasy, but Emily led him with such confidence that he quickly relaxed. She was close enough for him to catch the light aroma of her perfume, something floral and tart. "You're not so bad," she said, looking into his eyes. "You too," he answered, switching to you almost unconsciously. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" "As a child," she smiled. "Mom forced me to go ballroom dancing. I hated it, but it seemed like there was something left. I played football as a child," he said. "No dancing, just bruises and dirt." "Soccer player then?" She narrowed her eyes. "That explains why you're so persistent." "Persistent," he laughed. "Is this a compliment?" "For now, yes," she winked. They danced for a few more minutes, and James noticed that Tom was watching them from afar with a thumbs up. He rolled his eyes, but couldn't deny that he was enjoying this moment. Emily was unlike anyone he'd met before, not the businesswomen with whom he'd negotiated contracts or the casual acquaintances he'd met at parties. There was something alive and unpredictable about her, and it attracted him. When the music ended, she pulled away, but did not remove her hand from his shoulder. Well, James, she said, it was fun. What's next? Further, he looked at her, trying to understand whether she was joking or not. Yes, she tilted her head. You're not just going to go back to your whiskey and your friend, are you? He smiled. She was right, I didn't want to return to the usual course of the evening. Maybe some more champagne? He suggested. Great idea, she nodded. But only if you tell me something interesting about yourself. Deal? Deal, he agreed, and they headed to the bar. The morning at the Bright Horizon office began with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and the hum of voices behind the glass walls of the meeting room. James sat at his desk, staring at his laptop screen, but his mind was elsewhere on the quarterly report. A week had passed since that charity evening, and Emily could not get out of his mind. Her laugh, her cheeky green eyes, the way she made him dance, it all played on his mind like a broken record. He didn't even notice how Tom entered the office, holding 2 mugs in his hands. Hey, dreamer, Tom placed one of the mugs in front of James. Coffee. You look like you haven't slept all night. Slept. James took the mug, taking a sip. Just thinking. About the blonde from the party. Tom sat down opposite, crossing his arms. I told you, she hooked you. Did you get her number? James nodded, tapping his fingers on the table. Yes, and we corresponded a couple of times. A couple of times? Tom squinted. James Carter, are you afraid to call her? This doesn't sound like you. I'm not afraid, James rolled his eyes. I just don't want to rush. She's not like everyone else. That's true, Tom agreed. She looks like the kind of person who could turn your life upside down. In a good way, or bad, depends on how you play. Thanks for the advice, relationship guru. James chuckled. I'll call her today. Are you satisfied? Very, Tom stood up, slamming the table. And then you'll tell me how it all went. Now we get to work. We have a meeting with Pepsi in an hour. Tom left. When he left, James took his phone out of his pocket and opened a chat with Emily. The last message was from her, 3 days ago. Do you miss my dancing? He smiled, remembering how she moved that evening easily, confidently, with some kind of wild energy. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then he quickly typed. I miss you. Dinner today? I know a place with excellent wine. The answer came almost instantly. Only if you can dance there. 7 p.m. Agreed, he wrote, feeling his pulse quicken slightly. At 7 o'clock, James was waiting for her outside Luce, a cozy Italian restaurant in the West Village with warm lamplight and the smell of truffle oil. He chose this place for a reason. It was stylish, but not flashy, with a small area where live music was played on weekends. Today was Thursday, but he hoped Emily would still appreciate the atmosphere. She appeared at exactly 7:02, and James's breath caught in his throat. She wore a red dress with a plunging neckline that showed off every curve and black stilettos that made her legs seem endless. Her hair is down, slightly disheveled, as if she had just come out of a windy day. Hey, advertiser, she said, coming closer and kissing him on the cheek. Her perfume smelled of jasmine and something spicy. Hi, he smiled, trying not to stare too obviously. You look amazing, she prompted, raising an eyebrow. That's right, he opened the door for her. Come in. The waiter led them to a table by the window. Emily sat cross-legged and looked around the room. Nice, she said, but where is the music? You promised to dance. Music on Saturdays, he admitted, but I can turn on something on the phone if you insist. She laughed, leaning back in her chair. Okay, I forgive you. For now. But the wine should be good. The best they have, he assured, motioning to the waiter. Conversation flowed easily over a glass of Pinot Noir. She talked about her last trip to Miami, how she sunbathed on the beach, drank cocktails with umbrellas, and one night danced barefoot on the sand with some random musicians. You should have seen this, she said, her eyes sparkling. The moon, the waves, and I am the queen of the party. I believe, he smiled, imagining her in the spotlight. Aren't you tired of this rhythm? Tired. She looked at him as if he were crazy. Life is too short to be tired. And you? What do you do besides work? Not much, he admitted. Work, gym, sometimes books. Sometimes my friends drag me out to the bar. Boring, she shook her head. We need to fix this. Will you go somewhere with me? Somewhere? He narrowed his eyes. This sounds like a challenge. This is the challenge. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. For example, to Mexico, or to the Caribbean. Imagine, sun, sea, no reports. Tempting, he said. But I have a business. Clients. Responsibility. Responsibility, she rolled her eyes. You're too serious, James. Live a little. Maybe you can teach me, he winked, and she smiled back. After a couple of weeks, their meetings became regular. Dinner at the restaurant turned into a walk along the High Line, where Emily suddenly decided to walk along the railings, balancing like a gymnast while passers-by turned around. You're crazy, James shouted, grabbing her hand. Maybe, she jumped down, laughing. But you like it. He couldn't argue. He liked it. She was like a breath of fresh air in his ordered life. One evening, he invited her to his modern apartment in Tribeca overlooking the Hudson. She walked in, kicking off her shoes right at the door, and walked barefoot on the wooden floor. You live well, she said, looking around at the minimalist furniture and huge windows. But what's missing here is female chaos. Chaos, he laughed, opening a bottle of wine. Yes, she went to the stereo system and turned on some Latin American tracks at full volume. That's better. She grabbed his hand and pulled him to the center of the room. Dance with me, she demanded. There's no dance floor here, he objected. I don't care, she began to move, swaying her hips. Come on, don't stand there like a pillar. He gave in, adjusting to the rhythm. She laughed when he hesitated and guided his hands until they found a common tempo. By the end of the song, he was out of breath, but he felt more alive than he had in months. Do you see? She said, breathing heavily. You can be funny. Only with you, he answered, and it was the truth. Over the weekend, they went to the Hamptons. Emily insisted on renting a convertible, and they sped down the highway with the wind in their hair. She turned on the radio and sang at the top of her voice, not hitting the notes, but with such enthusiasm that it was infectious. Have you ever jumped with a parachute? She shouted over the noise of the wind. No, he shouted back. And I'm not going to. In vain, she turned to him, her eyes burning. It's like flying. We must try. You're crazy, he said, but smiled. On the beach, she shed her dress, leaving her in a bright yellow bikini, and ran towards the water. James watched her dive into the waves and thought he had never met anyone so free. When he joined her, she splashed water in his face and burst out laughing, running away from his attempts at revenge. You're too slow, she teased. You're too fast. He caught up with her and grabbed her by the waist. Both fell into the water, laughing. By the end of the month, their romance was in full swing. They dined in trendy restaurants, walked around the city at night, kissed under the lamps in Central Park. But sometimes James noticed something strange in her flashes of eccentricity, which he, for the time being, chalked up to her character. One day at a bar, she climbed onto the bar and started dancing until the bartender asked her to come down. People applauded, but James noticed a few glances at each other. Have you gone too far? He asked later as they walked to the car. Did you overdo it? She snorted. I was just having fun. Relax, James. Okay, he said, but a slight worry stirred in his chest. However, he shrugged it off. She was bright, unpredictable, and he fell in love with her slowly but surely. Every day with her was like an adventure, and he didn't want it to end. Summer in New York smelled of hot asphalt and blooming linden trees as James stood on the balcony of his Tribeca apartment, watching the sun set over the Hudson. A year has passed since that evening in the penthouse where he first met Emily, and this year has turned his life upside down. She burst into his world like a hurricane, noisy, bright, unstoppable, and now he could not imagine his days without her. There was a small velvet box in his jacket pocket, and his heart was beating a little faster than usual. He had been planning this for a month. Dinner on the roof, just the two of them, overlooking the city that witnessed their romance. The table was set, a white tablecloth, candles, a bottle of Dom Perignon in a bucket of ice. He even hired a violinist to play somewhere on the side, not disturbing, but creating an atmosphere. Everything must be perfect. James Carter is not used to doing things halfway. The doorbell interrupted his thoughts. He straightened his tie and went to open it. Emily stood on the threshold in a light ivory dress that flowed over her figure like water. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun with strands falling out, and she was holding a clutch purse in her hands. "Hello," she said, smiling in a way that made his insides clench. "You look suspiciously smart." "And you are suspiciously beautiful." He stepped back, letting her inside. "Come in." She walked into the apartment, throwing her purse on the sofa, and immediately noticed the open door to the balcony. Wow, she looked outside, seeing a table and candles. What is this, a date at the level of a Michelin restaurant? Something like that. He approached her from behind, lightly touching her waist. "I wanted to make the evening special." "You always make everything special." She turned to him, hugging him around the neck. "But there's something in the air today." "Are you nervous, James?" "I?" He grinned, although she was right. "Never." "Liar." She kissed the corner of his lips and pulled his hand. "Let's go, I'm hungry." Dinner began with some light chatting. Emily was talking about her friend who opened a gallery in Brooklyn and how she accidentally spilled coffee on some critic, ruining his white shirt. "He looked at me as if I had killed his dog," she laughed, cutting off a piece of salmon. "And I just said, relax, it's just coffee." "You really know how to leave an impression," James said, looking at her with a smile. "No wonder everyone remembers you." "And you?" She narrowed her eyes. "What do you think about me?" "That you are the most incredible woman I have ever met," he replied, and it was not just a compliment. He really thought so. She fell silent, looking at him with some new interest, and then smiled. "Careful, James. Such words can make a girl fall in love." "I count on it," he said quietly. The violinist began to play something slow, almost melancholic, and James realized that the moment had come. He pushed back his chair, stood up, and extended his hand to her. "Shall we dance?" he asked. "Here?" She raised her eyebrows, but stood up in a patient manner. "Let's try." They went out onto the balcony, and the soft evening breeze touched her face. James put his arm around her waist, and they began to move slowly to the music. Emily pressed herself against him, her breath warm against his neck. "You're different today," she whispered. "What's happening?" James took a deep breath. "It's time." He stopped, took her hands, and looked into her eyes. "Emily," he began, and his voice trembled. "This year with you. It changed everything. You made me feel alive. I don't want this to ever end." Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting. He got down on one knee, taking the box out of his pocket. He opened it, and inside was a sparkling diamond ring, simple but elegant. "Marry me," he said, looking up at her. "Be my wife." There was silence for a second. Then Emily gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh God, James." She laughed, but there was something nervous in her voice. This, this is so unexpected." "Is unexpectedly good or bad?" he asked, still on his knees. "Good, of course." She pulled him up, hugging him. "Yes, yes, damn it, I will marry you." He stood up, placed the ring on her finger, and she raised her hand, admiring the way the diamond caught the light. "It's perfect," she said, and then kissed him long, hard, with that passion that always knocked him off his feet. The next day, they were sitting in the Bright Horizon office. James had just told Tom the news, and Tom was leaning back in his chair, smiling widely. "Well, old man, congratulations," said Tom, raising his coffee mug in a playful toast. "You're officially caught." "Thanks," James chuckled. "It was easier than I thought." "Of course." Tom put the mug on the table. "She's crazy about you. But listen, we need to discuss something." "What exactly?" James frowned. Tom turned serious, crossing his arms. "The marriage contract," he said. "You need a marriage contract." "Tom, are you serious?" James leaned back, rolling his eyes. We just got engaged. Don't ruin the moment. I don't spoil, Tom objected. I'm protecting you and business. You are a co-owner of Bright Horizon. We have million-dollar contracts, clients like Pepsi and Nike. If something goes wrong, and I'm not saying it will, you could lose half of everything. Emily is not like that, James said, and there was an edge to his voice. She's not after money. Maybe not, Tom shrugged, but people change. Marriages are falling apart. It's just insurance, James. You don't sign a contract with a client without conditions, right? James was silent, looking out the window. He didn't like it. The thought of asking Emily to sign something like that felt like a betrayal of what they had built. But Tom was right, business was his life, and he couldn't risk everything for the sake of feelings. Okay, he said finally, I will think. In the evening, he invited Emily to Luce, the same place where they had their first date. She sat opposite, beaming, twirling the ring on her finger. I still can't believe it, she said, smiling. Mrs. Carter. Sounds solid, right? Very, he smiled back, but he felt heaviness inside. I should have said it. He cleared his throat, putting down his fork. Emily, there is something I wanted to talk about. She looked up from her pasta, narrowing her eyes. Wow, you're serious. What's happened? It's about marriage, he began carefully. Tom thinks we should sign a marriage contract to protect business. Her smile disappeared. She put down her fork and crossed her arms. Marriage contract? She asked, and a note of resentment appeared in her voice. You don't trust me. It's not a matter of trust. He raised his hands as if in defense. It's about business. We have big clients, big money. If something goes wrong. What if something goes wrong? She interrupted him. Her eyes narrowed. So you are already planning a divorce? No, damn it, he raised his voice, but immediately pulled himself together. I plan for the future. Our future. I just want us both to be safe. She looked at him for a long time, silently, and this silence was heavier than words. Finally, she sighed. Okay, she said coldly, if it's so important to you, I'll sign it. But now I don't like it. Thank you, he extended his hand across the table, but she didn't take it. It's just a formality. Formality, she repeated, looking to the side. Certainly. The next day, the lawyer brought the documents. Emily arrived at James' office dressed in jeans and a simple top, without her usual polish. She sat down at the table, took a pen, and looked through the pages. It says here that I will not receive anything from your business, she said without looking up, even if we are together for 20 years. This is standard, he said, standing at the window, to protect what happened before marriage. Before marriage, she snorted. How romantic. Emily, please, he turned to her. I love you. This is not about us. This is about lawyers and their rules. She looked at him, and there was something sharp, almost accusing in her gaze. You are sure? She asked quietly. Absolutely, he replied. She sighed, signed the last page, and threw her pen on the table. Here, she said, standing up. Your contract. You're safe now. We're safe, he corrected, but she was already heading for the door. I need to go for a walk, she said over her shoulder. See you later. The door closed and James was left alone, looking at the signed papers. He achieved his goal, but for some reason he didn't feel good. The sun was setting over the Long Island horizon as guests began to gather on the front lawn of a mansion in the Hamptons. A white tent glowed with lights, stretched over tables decorated with flowers and crystal glasses. The orchestra played a soft classical tune as waiters in black tuxedos served champagne on silver trays. It was the wedding of James and Emily, an event that was already whispered about in the circles of the New York elite. James stood at the entrance to the tent, adjusting the cuffs of his tuxedo, and looked at the arriving guests. He felt a little excitement, but more anticipation. Today, everything must be perfect. Are you nervous? Tom walked up to him, holding a glass of whiskey in his hands. His dark hair was combed back, and his smile, as always, was slightly mocking. Not really, James replied with a shrug. I just want everything to go smoothly. Starring Emily? Tom chuckled. Good luck, old man. She's not one to follow a script. I already understood that, James smiled, but a shadow of concern flashed in his voice. After the story with the marriage contract, there remained tension between them, thin as a spider's web, but palpable. She forgave him, or at least said she did, but sometimes he caught her gaze, cold and distant, and it made him wonder. Well, you chose her. Tom patted him on the shoulder. Now hold on tight. I'll go find myself another drink. James nodded as he watched Tom disappear into the crowd. He turned toward the tent, where guests were already gathering. Bright Horizon clients, friends from college, a few distant relatives. Everyone was dressed to the nines, women in silk dresses, men in tuxedos or expensive suits. This was his world, and today it was becoming even bigger than his. Emily showed up later, as planned, with all eyes turning to her. She emerged from a white Rolls-Royce parked in the driveway, accompanied by two bridesmaids. Her Vera Wang dress was a masterpiece, flowing, figure-hugging silk with a long train studded with tiny crystals, which sparkled in the rays of the sunset. The hair was styled in loose waves, and around her neck hung a diamond necklace, a gift from James. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale, and guests gasped as she began to walk down the path to the altar. James met her at the entrance to the tent, and for a moment his breath caught in his throat. "You are incredible," he said quietly, taking her hand. "I know," she answered with a smile, tilting her head slightly. "You're okay, too." He laughed, and they turned to the priest, who was already waiting under the arch of white roses. The ceremony went quickly. Vows, exchange of rings, the traditional, "You may kiss the bride." When their lips met, the crowd erupted into applause, and James felt the excitement release. She was his wife. It was real. After the ceremony, the reception began. The guests sat down at the tables, the orchestra started playing something more lively, and the waiters began serving dishes: oysters, foie gras, filet mignon with truffle sauce. James and Emily sat at the head of the table, accepting congratulations and smiling for the photographer. Everything went according to plan until it was time for the first dance. They walked out to the middle of the tent, where a small dance floor had been set up. The lights dimmed and the orchestra began playing "Can't Help Falling in Love." James put his arm around Emily's waist, and they began to move, slowly, confidently, just like that first evening in the penthouse. "This is our day," he whispered in her ear. "Are you happy?" "Very," she replied, snuggling closer. "And you?" "More than I can say," he smiled. The dance ended with applause, and James was about to lead her back to the table when Emily suddenly stopped. "Wait," she said, beaming. "I want to do something." "What?" He frowned, but she had already turned to the orchestra. "Hey guys," she shouted, waving her hand. "Let's do something more fun." The musicians looked at each other, then nodded and began to play. The crowd became animated, and some clapped their hands. Emily grabbed James' hand and pulled him back to the dance floor. "Come on," she said, starting to move into the rhythm. "Show me what you can do, hubby." "Emily, that wasn't part of the plan," he muttered, but she just laughed. "Forget about the plan. This is a wedding, not a business meeting." She spun, her train flying, and several guests laughed as they joined her. James sighed, but played along. He danced with her, trying not to pay attention to the looks from the tables. It was sweet, spontaneous, her style, but something in him tensed. By midnight, the party was in full swing. The champagne flowed, the dance floor filled with people, and Emily became the star of the show. She pulled the bridesmaids to the middle and began an impromptu dance, something between ballroom moves and something more explicit. Her dress rode up a little higher than it should have as she bent and twirled, and several men in the crowd whistled in approval. James stood at the edge of the dance floor, glass in hand, and watched. At first he smiled. She was beautiful, energetic, his Emily. But then I noticed how some of the guests looked at each other. One of Bright Horizon's customers, an older man in a gray suit, leaned over to his wife and whispered something, pointing at Emily. She shook her head, pursing her lips. "She's something, huh?" Tom walked up to him, also watching the scene. "Yes," James answered, but his voice was quieter than usual. "Relax. Tom patted him on the back. This is her night. Let him have fun. I don't mind her having fun, James said. It's too much. Too much? Tom squinted. It's a wedding, James. People get drunk, dance, do stupid things. Nobody will discuss this tomorrow. I hope so, he muttered. But when Emily climbed onto the chair and began conducting the orchestra, waving her arms like a real maestro, James felt something clench inside. The guests laughed, some even applauded, but he noticed Tom exchange a glance with another business partner, Mark, who shook his head slightly. Emily, he called, coming closer. Maybe you'll come down? Oh, come on. She jumped, almost losing her balance, and hung on his neck. Her breath smelled like champagne. Aren't you having fun? I'm having fun, he said, supporting her. I just don't want you to fall. I won't fall, she snorted, pulling away. I'm fine. I'll go find the girls. She walked away, swaying to her friends, and James remained standing, looking after her. He loved her more than he could express, but this evening, which should have been their shared triumph, suddenly seemed a little uncontrollable. Later, as the guests began to leave and the tent was empty, James found Emily by the fountain in the backyard. She sat on the edge, barefoot, holding her shoes in her hands, and looked at the water. Tired? He asked, sitting down next to her. A little, she smiled, but without the usual enthusiasm. It was the best night, huh? Yes, he nodded, taking her hand. You were a star. Okay, she laid her head on his shoulder. I wanted you to remember everything for this day. They will remember, he said, and it was true. Only he wasn't sure that all the memories would be the way he wanted. The silence in the maternity ward at Mount Sinai Hospital was deafening after hours of shouting and bustling. James stood by the window, looking at tiny Liam, wrapped in a white blanket, lying in a plastic crib next to Emily's bed. The boy was born at 3:17 am, with thick dark hair and a wrinkled face that already resembled Emily. James felt fatigue and something huge, inexplicable pride, love, fear mixing inside him. He became a father. Emily lay on the bed, pale, with disheveled hair, but still beautiful. She looked at Liam with a soft smile, although there was exhaustion in her eyes. He's perfect, she said quietly, reaching out to touch his tiny palm. Have you seen his fingers? So small. I saw it. James walked up to her, sitting on the edge of the bed. He's all about you. I hope not, she laughed weakly. Let at least a little be in you. Calm, serious. Maybe he'll get the best of both of us. He took her hand and squeezed it. You did great, Emily. It was incredible. That hurt like hell, she rolled her eyes, but smiled wider. But yes, it was worth it. James leaned down and kissed her forehead, feeling the tension of the last few hours ease away. They were family now, him, Emily and Liam. It was a new beginning. The first weeks at home flew by in a strange fog. The Tribeca apartment was a mess. Bottles, diapers, a crib in the living room. James tried to be there, took days off, helped with night feedings, but work at Bright Horizon did not wait. A new contract with Coca-Cola required his attention, and he increasingly stayed in the office until midnight. One evening, he returned home around 10, loosening his tie in the elevator. The apartment was quiet. Only a faint light from the living room made its way into the corridor. He found Emily on the couch, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, holding Liam in her arms. The boy was sleeping, quietly snoring, and she was looking at the phone, scrolling through something with a blank expression on her face. Hi, James said, setting his briefcase by the door. How are you? Fine, she answered without looking up. He just fell asleep. He screamed for an hour while I rocked him to sleep. Do you want me to take it? He came closer. You could rest. No, she shook her head. If you wake him up, the nightmare will begin. Let him sleep. Okay? He sat down next to him, looking at his son. Did he behave well today? As usual, she shrugged. Ate, slept, cried. Repeat endlessly. James nodded, feeling slightly guilty. He knew that Emily managed most of the day alone, but the business gave him no respite. I'll bring you some wine, he said, standing up. You deserve it. Thank you, She finally looked at him, and there was something tired in her smile. "You're late today." "Yes," he sighed, pouring 2 glasses of Merlot in the kitchen. The negotiations dragged on. Coca-Cola wants a new campaign for Christmas, and we can't let them down. "Of course," she said, accepting the glass. "Your world revolves around them, and mine revolves around diapers." "It won't be long." He sat back down. "As soon as the contract is signed, I will take a vacation. Let's go somewhere, the three of us." "Somewhere," she repeated with a slight mockery. "You always say that." "I'm serious." He took her hand. "Maybe to California, or to the Caribbean, as you wanted." She took a sip of wine, looking somewhere to the side. "We'll see," she said quietly. "For now, I just want to sleep for more than 3 hours in a row." A month has passed, and life has entered a new rhythm. Liam grew, became more active, and Emily began to return to herself the bright, energetic woman whom James fell in love with. She hired a nanny to get out of the house sometimes, and that seemed to help. But James noticed that she was increasingly going out to go for a walk or meet her friends, leaving Liam with a nanny even when he was at home. One Saturday morning, he woke up to the sound of a door slamming. Liam was crying in his crib and Emily was nowhere to be seen. James stood up, picked up his son, and rocked him until he calmed down. Half an hour later, she returned, coffee in hand and a bright jacket over her leggings. "Good morning," she said, putting the glass on the table. "Are you up already?" "Yes," he nodded at Liam, who was now lying quietly on his chest. He was crying. "Where have you been?" "I went for coffee," she shrugged. "The nanny should come in an hour, and I couldn't sit locked up any longer." "Locked up?" He frowned. "This is our home." "Home, yes." She took off her jacket, throwing it on the sofa. "But I feel caged, James. It's the same thing all the time. Feed, change, rock. I'm not made for this." "You are a mother, Emily," he said, trying to speak softly. "It's part of life." "I know." She looked at him, and a shadow of irritation flashed in her eyes. "But I'm not only a mother. I'm also human. I need to breathe." He fell silent, looking at her. He wanted to object, to say that he, too, was tired, that the work exhausted him no less, but he saw that she was on the verge. "Okay," he said finally, "let's hire a full-time nanny so that you have more time." "Is it true?" Her face brightened. "Are you serious?" "Yes," he nodded. "I don't want you to feel like this." "Thank you." She walked over and hugged him, clinging to him and Liam. "You're the best." The nanny, a middle-aged woman named Maria, became a salvation. She came every morning, took charge of Liam, and Emily began to come to life. She signed up for yoga, met with friends, even went to the opening of some exhibition in Soho. James was glad to see her happy, but his schedule was only getting busier. Coca-Cola signed the contract, but now presentations, meetings, and endless edits were required. One evening, he returned home and found Emily in the living room. She stood at the mirror, trying on a bright red dress that he had not seen before. Liam slept in his crib and Maria put away bottles in the kitchen. "Are you going somewhere?" he asked, taking off his jacket. "Yes," she turned to him, smiling. "The girls are inviting you to join the new club in meatpacking. Opening, champagne, everything." "And Liam?" He nodded towards the crib. "Maria will stay," she answered, putting on her earrings. I agreed. "I won't be back too late." "It's not too late. When is it?" He crossed his arms. "I don't know, around 2 o'clock." She shrugged. "Don't start, James. You said it yourself that I need time for myself." He sighed. "It's just, I thought we were going to spend the evening together." "I left early." "Oh," she stopped, looking at him. "Well, you could come with me." "To the club?" He grinned. "After 12 o'clock in the office. Thank you, I'll pass." "As you wish." She approached him, kissing him on the cheek. "Don't be bored without me." She left, leaving a trail of perfume behind her, and James remained standing in the middle of the room, looking at the sleeping Liam. He loved her, loved their son, but something in this new reality began to worry him. Everything was not working out as he had planned. He thought that with the birth of the child she would become calmer, but alas. The rain was pattering against the windows of the Tribeca apartment, turning the evening into a gray haze when James heard Emily calling him from the bathroom. Her voice was strange, harsh, almost panicked, and he threw the laptop onto the couch where he was working on a presentation for Night to check what was wrong. Liam, now 3 years old, played with wooden cars on the floor, oblivious to the noise. "James," she shouted again, and he quickened his pace. He found her sitting on the edge of the bathtub, her face pale and her hands clutching something small and white. "Pregnancy test. 2 stripes. What is this?" he began, but she interrupted. "Yes," she said, looking at him with wide eyes. "I'm pregnant. Again." James froze, trying to comprehend. Liam was born just over 3 years ago, and they weren't planning on having a second child, at least not right now. He was up to his neck in work. The agency was expanding, and Emily was just beginning to find herself after the birth of Liam, to return to her bright, free life. "Are you sure?" he asked, although the answer was obvious. 2 tests, both positive. She threw the test into the sink as if it had burned her hands. "I don't know how it happened. We were careful." Well, not really. He remembered several nights when caution gave way to passion and rubbed his temples. "Okay, it's unexpected, but we can handle it." "Can we handle it?" She looked at him, and bitterness flashed in her voice. "James, I just started breathing. And now all over again?" "Emily," he stepped towards her, placing his hand on her shoulder. "This is our child. We are family." "I know," she pulled away, standing up and crossing her arms. "But I'm not ready. Not now." He looked at her, feeling something clench inside. He wanted to say something encouraging, but the words got stuck in his throat. Instead, he simply nodded. "We'll figure it out," he said finally. "Together." She snorted but didn't object and went into the bedroom, leaving him alone with the dough in the sink. 9 months later, Sophie was born at the same Mount Sinai hospital, but this time it was different. No joy for the first time, no trepidation. Emily insisted on a cesarean section to get this over with quickly, and when James entered the room, she lay with her eyes closed, not even looking at her daughter. Sophie was small, with thin blonde hair and a soft squeak instead of a scream. James took her in his arms, feeling the warmth of her tiny body, and smiled. "Hey, baby," he whispered. "Welcome." Emily opened her eyes, looked at them, and smiled faintly. "She's cute," she said without much enthusiasm. "Looks like Liam." "Yes," he agreed, sitting down next to her. "How are you?" "I'm tired," she sighed, "and I want to go home." "How long are we going to hang around here?" "A day or two," he answered. "The doctors said everything went well." "Okay," she turned to the window, and the conversation ended. James looked at Sophie, feeling a mixture of tenderness and anxiety. He knew Emily didn't want this baby, not the way she wanted Liam, and that knowledge weighed heavily on his heart. At home, the chaos doubled. Liam, now an energetic 3-year-old, ran around the apartment demanding attention, and Sophie woke up every 2 hours, crying in a thin, shrill voice. Maria, the nanny, stayed for the full day, but even with her help, Emily looked exhausted. She stopped wearing makeup, wore only sports clothes, and often sat on the couch looking at her phone while the children were with Maria. One evening, James returned from work to find the living room empty. Liam and Sophie were sleeping in their rooms, Maria was reading a book in the kitchen, and Emily was gone. "Where is she?" he asked, taking off his coat. "I left an hour ago," Maria answered without looking up from the pages. "She said she'd be back by midnight." "Where?" he frowned. "I don't know," Maria shrugged. "She said that she needed to ventilate." James nodded, feeling irritated. He walked into the bedroom, threw his briefcase on the bed, and took out his phone. Wrote to Emily, "Where are you? Is everything okay?" The answer came 10 minutes later. "At a bar with friends. Everything is okay. Don't wait up." He stared at the screen, gripping the phone a little tighter than necessary. Don't wait. This was not the first time in recent weeks. Since Sophie was born, Emily began to go out more and more often to go for a walk, to meet the girls, to have fun. At first, he didn't mind, she deserved a break, but now it was becoming too frequent. When she returned at 1 o'clock in the morning, he was sitting in the living room with a glass of whiskey. Her heels clicked on the floor as she walked in, swaying slightly, bright lipstick smeared on her lips. "Oh, you're not asleep yet," she said, throwing her purse on the table. "How nice. Where have you been?" he asked, trying to speak calmly. At Lebain, she plopped down on the sofa next to him. There was a DJ, champagne flowed like a river, it was fun. "Emily," he turned to her, "we have 2 children. You can't just leave every night." "Every night?" She rolled her eyes. "This is the 3rd time in a week. Don't exaggerate. This is the 3rd time in a week that I come home and you're not there." His voice became harsher. "Maria can't be here forever. And I also want to see my wife." "Oh, please," she stood up, crossing her arms. "You're in the office all day, James. You see your clients more often than you see me or the kids. Am I supposed to sit here and go crazy? I'm working so that we have everything." He also stood up, looking into her eyes. "What are you doing? Do you dance in clubs while the kids are with the nanny?" "I live," she shouted, and her voice echoed in the room. "I can't just be a mother, James. I'm not like you. I need more." He fell silent, feeling his anger give way to weariness. He wanted to argue, but he could see that she was on edge, and he was too exhausted for that. "Okay," he said finally, "do what you want. But don't forget that you have a family and responsibilities. Think about the children." "I think about them," she snorted, going into the bedroom. "Just not like you." The door slammed and James was left alone, staring at the empty glass in his hand. Several weeks passed and the situation did not improve. Emily went out almost every evening, leaving Liam and Sophie with Maria. Sometimes she returned drunk, sometimes just tired, but always with some excuse. The opening of a bar, a friend's birthday, she needed to unwind. James stopped asking, but each time she left a deeper impression on him. One Saturday morning, he decided to take the day off to spend time with his children. Liam was building a tower out of blocks, and Sophie was lying in the playpen, chewing on a toy. Emily came down the stairs wearing a short dress and carrying a bag over her shoulder. "Where are you going?" he asked, looking up from the floor. "Dating Kate," she replied, putting on her sunglasses. "She's opening a boutique in the West Village. I'll be there in a couple of hours." "And the children?" He nodded towards Liam and Sophie. "Maria will come in half an hour," she said casually. "You can handle it before that, right?" "Emily," he stood up, lowering his voice. "I took the day off so we could be together. Family." "Oh," she stopped, looking at him. "Well, that's nice. But I already promised Kate. I can't let her down. Can you do us?" The words came out of their own accord, sharper than he intended. She froze, then slowly took off her glasses. "What do you want to say?" she asked coldly. "I want to say that you are somewhere all the time." He stepped closer. "The children hardly see you. I hardly see you. This isn't family, Emily." "Don't start," she raised her hand. "I do what I can. You don't understand how hard it is for me to sit here while you build your empire. Don't you understand that it's hard for me too?" He raised his voice. "I work so that we can have a life. And you just run away." "I'm not running away." She threw her glasses on the table. "I'm breathing. And if you don't like it, that's your problem." She left, slamming the door once again, and James stood there, listening to Liam calling to him. "Dad, look, the tower has fallen." He knelt down to help his son assemble the blocks, but his thoughts were far away. The standard on the High Line was abuzz with voices, laughter, and clinking glasses as Bright Horizons celebrated its annual corporate event. The lights of the skyscrapers behind the huge windows reflected in the glass, creating the illusion that all of New York was celebrating with them. It was a night of triumph. The agency closed the year with record profits, signing contracts with Nike, Pepsi, and a promising new tech startup. James stood at one of the high tables, surrounded by customers, having a casual conversation with Michael Reed from Pepsi. His dark blue suit fit perfectly, and his voice carried the confidence of a man who knows everything is under control. "Your team outdid itself with the last campaign," Michael said, sipping his whiskey. "These videos with young people are right on target. Sales increased by 12%. "Good to hear," James replied, smiling. "We're already thinking about something big for the next quarter. Maybe something to do with the Super Bowl." "Sounds ambitious," Michael nodded. "I love it when you go all in." James wanted to answer, but his gaze caught movement at the entrance. Emily had just entered, half an hour late, and immediately attracted attention. She wore a form-fitting champagne-colored dress with a high slit at the side, elegant but with a touch of sass. Her hair was styled in loose waves, and the necklace he'd given her for her anniversary glittered around her neck. She looked like a star, and James felt the usual twinge of pride and a little worry. "Is this your wife?" Michael asked, following his gaze. "Yes," James nodded. "Emily." "Beautiful," Michael said with a slight smile, "and he seems to know how to make an impressive entrance." "That's true," James agreed, but his tone was a little more tense than he intended. Emily noticed him and walked towards the table, her gait confident, almost theatrical. She hugged him, pressing him lightly, and kissed him on the cheek. "Hi, honey," she said, her voice a little louder than usual. "Sorry for being late. Traffic jams in the center are just hell." "It's okay," he smiled, hugging her back. "The main thing is that you are here." Of course, she took a glass of champagne from the tray of a passing waiter. "I couldn't miss your big evening." "You look good, Emily," Michael said, holding out his hand. "Michael Reed, Pepsi. Nice to meet you." "Oh, Pepsi." She shook his hand, smiling wider. "I love your Diet Lemon." "Emily Carter, nice to meet the man who pays my husband." Michael laughed and James relaxed. "Maybe the evening will go smoothly." The first part of the evening was perfect. Toasts, light music, conversations about business. James gave a speech thanking the team and clients, and the crowd responded with applause. Emily sat next to him at the head table, sipping champagne and occasionally whispering something funny to him about the guests. But by the middle of the evening, when the orchestra began to play a background tune and people began to disperse into groups, she became restless. "It's boring here," she said, putting down her empty glass. "Everyone is so serious." "It's a corporate event, Emily," James replied, lowering his voice. "People work, make connections." "Connections," she snorted. "They're just showing off to each other. I'll go get another drink." She stood up and walked towards the bar, and James followed her with his eyes. He noticed that she was already on her third glass, and this was beginning to worry him. But he was distracted when Tom walked up with Mark, another partner at the agency. "Michael is delighted," Tom said, nodding at Reed, who was talking to someone at the window. "He says he wants to increase the budget for next year." "Great," James replied. "If everything goes the same way, we can open a branch in Los Angeles." "That would be cool," Mark agreed. "But let's not relax. Reputation is everything to us." "I know," James said, and his gaze involuntarily slid to Emily. She stood at the bar, talking to a woman in a sharp black dress, Linda Crawford, the head of marketing for a new tech startup that Bright Horizon had just begun working with. Linda was in her 40s, with sharp features and a reputation as a tough negotiator. James tensed, hoping Emily would control herself. A few minutes later, he heard her voice loud, sharp, drowning out the roar of the hall. He turned to see Emily arguing with Linda, waving her arms. Several heads had already turned in their direction. "Damn," he muttered, apologizing to Tom and Mark, and heading towards the bar. As he came closer, the words became clear. "Do you seriously think that your startup is so innovative?" Emily said, her tone mocking. "This is just another application for the lazy. My husband does the real work." "Sorry." Linda raised her eyebrows, her voice as cold as ice. "I don't discuss business with people who aren't in the know, Mrs. Carter." "Oh, I'm on board." Emily stepped closer, almost spilling the champagne. "I know that you pay Bright Horizon pennies, but you demand it as if you were Google. Maybe you should appreciate them more." "Emily," James intervened, placing his hand on her shoulder. Enough. What? She turned around, her eyes sparkling. I'm just telling the truth. She's arrogant. Am I arrogant? Linda crossed her arms. This is funny. James, is your wife always so? Frank. Sorry, Linda, he said quickly. She didn't mean to offend you. Oh, I wanted to, Emily snorted, swatting his hand away. She looks down on everyone. Maybe she should come down to earth. The guests around fell silent, watching. Michael Reed, standing nearby, whispered something to his wife, who shook her head. James felt the heat rise to his face. Emily, let's go, he said, lowering his voice to a whisper. You're going too far. No, she's overreacting, Emily answered louder than necessary. And you too, if you're protecting her and not me. Linda smiled coldly. James, I'll talk to you later, she said, turning and walking back to her desk. Emily looked after her, then at James. What? She said. Did I say something wrong? Yes, damn it. He grabbed her elbow and pulled her aside, away from prying eyes. You just insulted our client. In front of everyone. And what? She pulled her hand away. She asked for it herself. Did you hear her talk about your work? As if you were her servants. This is business, Emily. He clenched his fists, trying not to shout. She pays us. And not kopecks, but hundreds of thousands. Do you even understand what you put at risk? Oh, of course, your precious business. She rolled her eyes. Always him. Should I be silent and nod like your subordinates? No, he stepped closer. But you might as well not make a scene at my corporate party. This is our corporate party, she corrected. I'm your wife, in case you forgot. Then behave accordingly. The words came out harsher than he intended. She froze, looking at him, then snorted and walked back to the bar, ordering another cocktail. James remained standing, feeling the guest's eyes boring into his back. Tom came up behind him, putting his hand on his shoulder. It was awkward, he said quietly. I know, James replied, looking at Emily. We should have stopped her earlier. She's not one to stop easily, Tom shrugged. What's next? Settle it, James said. I'll call Linda tomorrow. I'm sorry. Good luck, Tom patted him on the back and left. When the evening ended and the guests had left, James found Emily at the window. She stood looking out over the city, an empty glass in her hand. Let's go home, he said, trying to speak calmly. Already? She turned around, her voice slightly blurred. I thought you would want to stay and save your reputation. Emily, he sighed. Let's just go. In the car, she was silent, looking out the window, and he drove, replaying the conversation with Linda in his head. He will have to apologize, explain, perhaps offer a discount. It was a blow, not a disaster, but enough to make the partners start whispering. You're angry, she said finally. Yes, he admitted. Do you even understand what you've done? I protected you, she turned to him. She acted like a bitch. She's a client, Emily, he raised his voice. My work depends on people like her. Our lives depend on it. Oh, of course, all for the sake of business, she snorted. Am I just decoration? No, he hit the steering wheel. But you might want to think before you speak. This is not a club. This is my career. Then maybe you shouldn't have taken me with you, she said coldly. If and I'm such a problem. He didn't answer. The rest of the drive was silent, and when they arrived home, she went into the bedroom, and he remained in the living room, looking into the darkness. The agency's reputation was in jeopardy, and for the first time he wondered if he could keep everything the business, the family, Emily together. Morning light filtered through the blinds in the living room of a Tribeca apartment, casting streaks across the wood floor. James sat at the kitchen island, sipping black coffee and scrolling through email on his tablet. After yesterday's corporate party, his head was buzzing not from alcohol, but from thoughts about what he had to settle with Linda Crawford. He had already written her a short apology, but he knew that this was not enough. Bright Horizon's reputation was hanging by a thread, all because of one outburst from Emily. Liam and Sophie were still sleeping, and Maria was due to arrive in an hour to pick them up for their walk. The silence in the house was deceptive like the calm before the storm. The bedroom door slammed and Emily came out in a long t-shirt and leggings, her hair disheveled and traces of last night's mascara under her eyes. She walked past him to the coffee maker without saying a word and began pouring herself a cup. "Good morning," James said without looking up from the screen. "Uh-huh," she replied, her voice hoarse and indifferent. He put the tablet down, looking at her. She stood with her back turned, stirring the sugar into the coffee with such force as if she was trying to break through the bottom of the mug. "We need to talk," he said finally. "About what?" She turned around, crossing her arms. "About how I ruined your precious evening yesterday." "Yes," he nodded, trying to speak calmly. "About what you said to Linda Crawford, and what it looked like." "What did it look like?" She snorted, taking a sip. "I told the truth. She's arrogant, and you know it." "It doesn't matter," he stood up, leaning on the tabletop. "She's a client, Emily. A new client we just started working with. And you made a scene in front of everyone." "A stage?" Her eyes narrowed. "I just talked to her. If she can't handle honesty, that's her problem." "No, that's my problem." His voice became harsher. "I'll call her today, apologize, perhaps offer a discount so she doesn't break the contract. Because of you." "Oh, poor James." She set the mug down on the table with a loud thud. "Saving his business from his evil wife. Maybe I should give you a medal." "Emily," he stepped towards her. "This is not a joke. My work is what keeps us all going. House, children, your entertainment, all this is paid for from there." "My entertainment?" She raised her eyebrows. "You mean those rare moments when I break out of this prison so as not to go crazy?" "This is not a prison," he raised his voice. "This is our home, our family, and I want you to behave in such a way that it doesn't ruin everything I'm building. Did you behave?" She stepped closer, looking into his eyes. "Do you want me to be quiet, obedient, sit at home and smile at your clients? It's not me, James." "I'm not asking you to change," he said, clenching his fists. "I ask for restraint. Just think before you say or do anything that could harm us." "Restraint," she repeated mockingly. "You want to control me. Admit it." "This is not control," he shook his head. "It's common sense. You can't insult people out of the blue." "And you can't tell me what to say and expect me to nod," she retorted. "I'm not your puppet, James." They fell silent, standing opposite each other. The silence rang in my ears, interrupted only by Sophie's faint cries from the nursery. James sighed, rubbing his temples. "I don't want to quarrel," he said more quietly, "but we need to find a common language. For the children, for us." "Common language," she snorted, turning away. "You want me to adapt to you." "This is not a common language. This is subordination." "Damn it, Emily." He slammed his palm on the table. "I don't ask for submissions. I ask that you respect my work, our life." "Do you respect mine?" She turned sharply. "Have you ever asked what I want? Or do you not care as long as I don't interfere with your business?" "I asked," he said, although deep down he knew that this was not entirely true. "You wanted a nanny, I found Maria. You wanted freedom, I gave you time. But you're crossing the line." "The devil?" She laughed, but the laugh was bitter. "You draw it yourself, James. And every time you move further so that there is less space for me." He opened his mouth to answer, but at that moment Liam ran into the living room, sleepy, with disheveled hair. "Mom, Dad, why are you screaming?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. Emily immediately softened, knelt down, and hugged him. "We don't scream, baby," she said tenderly. "We're just talking loudly. Come here." James looked at them, feeling his anger recede, giving way to weariness. He came over and hugged Liam too, but there was an invisible wall between him and Emily. "Sorry, son," he said. "We won't do it anymore." Liam nodded and ran back to his room as Emily stood up, looking at James. "For his sake, I'll try," she said quietly. "But don't expect me to become different." "I'm not waiting," he replied. "Just be careful." She didn't answer, went into the kitchen, and he heard her open the refrigerator. The quarrel ended, but nothing was resolved. The days after the office party turned into a series of minor skirmishes. James called Linda, apologized, promised a discount on the next project, and she, fortunately, agreed to continue cooperation, but with a cold note in her voice. He told Emily about it over dinner, hoping she would understand the magnitude. "I've got it right with Linda," he said, cutting into the steak. "But it wasn't easy." "Well done," she replied, without looking up from her plate. Hero of the day. "Emily," he put down his fork, "you might regret it at least a little." "What to regret?" She looked at him. "I said what I think. If you're willing to grovel before her, that's your choice. This is not a reptile." He clenched his jaw. "This is business. Don't you understand how this works?" She went into the bedroom, leaving him at the table. He stared at his half-eaten dinner, feeling the words "you want to control me" echoing in his head. A week later, the tension flared up again. Emily announced that she was going to a friend's party, and James, tired of her leaving, could not restrain himself. "Again?" he asked, standing in the doorway of the living room while she put on her shoes. "You were somewhere just yesterday." "And what?" She looked at him over her shoulder. "I have a right to life, James." "Do children have a right to their mother?" He crossed his arms. "For my wife? Oh, don't start that song." She straightened up, her eyes sparkling. "Maria is with them. They're fine. And I can't sit here forever." "You don't sit forever," he said. "You go out almost every evening. This is not normal." "Fine." She stepped towards him. "You decide what's normal? Are you in control of my schedule now?" "I don't control." He raised his voice. "I ask you to think about us, about what it looks like." "What does it look like?" She laughed. "Do you care what your clients think? Or neighbors? You're obsessed with this, James. And you are obsessed with yourself." The words came out of their own accord. "You only think about your fun, and I'm dealing with the consequences." "Consequences?" She froze, looking at him. "You blame me for everything, right? For Linda, for your reputation, for the fact that you can't relax." "I blame you for not seeing beyond your nose," he said coldly. "Bottom. You live as if we have no obligations." "And you live as if I were your property," she retorted. "Do you want me to be an ideal wife? Find another one." She grabbed her bag and left, slamming the door. James remained standing, listening to the silence fill the room. He walked to the window, looking out at the city lights, and for the first time he thought that maybe they had gone too far. The dim lamplight cast shadows on the walls of the Tribeca living room as James sat on the couch with a glass of whiskey in his hand. The clock showed 11:47 p.m., and the apartment was silent. Liam and Sophie were sleeping in their rooms. Maria had gone home a few hours ago. Emily was gone again. She said she was going to a friend's bachelorette party, but this was not the first time in a week, and each time she returned later than promised. James stared at the blank TV screen, trying to distract himself, but his thoughts revolved around her excuses, her abrupt answers, her departures. The last months have since turned into a cold war. They spoke to each other, but these were short, formal phrases. "Buy milk. Maria will come at 8. I'll be late at the office." The love that once burned between them now smoldered under the ashes of mutual reproaches. But today something was different. He noticed this in the morning when she received a call at breakfast and quickly went out onto the balcony, closing the door. Her voice was muffled, but he caught a laugh light, flirtatious, not the one she had been giving him lately. James took a sip of his whiskey, feeling the warmth spread through his chest, but it could not drown out the cold foreboding. He stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city lights, trying to remember when everything went wrong. Maybe after Sophie, or after that corporate party, or was it always there in her, this need for freedom that he could not satisfy? The door clicked, and he turned around. Emily walked in, kicking off her shoes right at the door. She was wearing a short leather skirt and a sequin top. Her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were shiny, either from the alcohol or something else. "You're late again," he said, trying to speak evenly. "Yes." She threw her purse on the table and headed towards the kitchen. Time flew by. "What time is it?" he asked, although he knew the answer. It's probably midnight. She opened the refrigerator, taking out a bottle of water. Don't start, James. I'm tired. You said you'd be back by 10. He stepped closer, holding the glass in his hand. Oh, God, she rolled her eyes, taking a sip of water. Are you my warden now? I'm an adult. I can stay longer. I'm not a warden. He clenched his jaw. I'm your husband, and I wonder where you've been. With friends, she turned to him, crossing her arms. I told you so. Kate's bachelorette party. What else do you need? Is it true? He narrowed his eyes. Because this morning you were talking to someone on the balcony, and it didn't sound like Kate. Her face trembled barely noticeable, but he caught it. She put the bottle on the table and looked at him challengingly. Are you spying on me? She asked coldly. No, he shook his head. I just heard. And what? She stepped closer. I can't laugh with someone other than you. Do you want me to be unhappy? I want to know who you were with, he said, feeling his voice become harsher. You go out almost every evening. Calls, messages, late returns. What's going on? Do you have someone? Nothing is happening, she snorted, turning away. You're paranoid, James. Go to bed. She started towards the bedroom, but he grabbed her wrist. Emily, he said quietly but firmly, look at me and tell me I'm wrong. She pulled her hand away, looking at him with fury. You're wrong, she said, but her voice was too harsh, too fast. Have you calmed down? Now leave me alone. She left, slamming the bedroom door, and James stood there, feeling his suspicions growing. He walked over to the table where her purse lay and froze. I wanted to open it and check my phone, but I stopped. It would be overkill. Or not. He returned to the sofa, finished his whiskey, and stared at the ceiling. Something was wrong, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. The next day at the Bright Horizon office, he was distracted. The meeting with the team on the new night project passed him by. He nodded, agreed, but his thoughts were somewhere else. Tom noticed this when they were alone in his office. You look like you haven't slept, Tom said, sitting down opposite him. What's happened? Emily, James answered, rubbing his temples. She returned late. Again. It's already a tradition, Tom shrugged. She always loved parties. It's not just parties, James said, looking out the window. She's hiding something. Calls, departures, strange excuses. Tom frowned, leaning back in his chair. Do you think He didn't finish, but James understood. I don't know, he admitted, but I feel it. Something's wrong. Maybe you're tired, Tom said. Work, children, quarrels. It may be in the head. Maybe, James nodded. But I can't live like this. I need to know. Then talk to her, Tom suggested. Directly. No hints. I tried, he smiled bitterly. She accuses me of being controlling. Avoids answering. Tom paused, then leaned closer. Seriously, he said quietly. There are people who can find out. Private detectives. I know one. Detective? James frowned. Isn't that too much? But not to suffer. Tom objected. If it's clean, you'll calm down. If not, you know better. James looked at him, feeling an idea settle in his head. It was extreme, but the thought of the truth, any truth, seemed better than this unknown. Let me think, he said finally. Tom nodded and walked away, leaving him alone with thoughts that were getting darker. A cold wind blew through the streets of the Lower East Side as James pushed open the door of a small office on the second floor of an old brick building. The sign, Robert Kane, Private Investigator, hung crookedly, and the inside smelled of coffee and old paper. After a week of doubt, he finally called the number Tom gave and made an appointment. He was sick of the very fact that he was here, but his suspicions did not go away. Every call from Emily, every time she left, only strengthened them. Robert Kane sat at a table littered with folders and empty coffee cups. He was about 45, with short, graying hair and a tired look that betrayed a man who had seen too much. He stood up, holding out his hand. James Carter? He asked, his voice low and slightly hoarse. Yes, James shook hands, sitting down opposite. Thank you for meeting me. No problem. Robert sat back, leaning back in his chair. Tom said you need help. What's happening? James paused, looking at his hands. Saying it out loud was harder than he thought, but he had no other options. Got it, Robert wrote something down. Anything else? She's different, James continued. Cold. We fight. She accuses me of being controlling, but I just want the truth. How old is she? Asked Robert. 34, James answered. We have 2 children, Liam and Sophie. She has a hard time with them, but that's no excuse. Maybe not, Robert shrugged. Or maybe yes. People look for a way out in different ways. What do you want from me? Find out, James said firmly. Who is she with? Where it happens? I can't live in guesswork. Okay, Robert put down his pen. I can follow. Usually this is a week or 2. Photos, videos, if you're lucky. 5,000 in advance, the rest later. James nodded, taking out his checkbook. It was a lot of money, but peace was worth more. When will you start? He asked, writing out the check. Tomorrow, Robert replied, taking the check. Give me her photo, schedule, habits, everything you know. James handed him a photo of Emily from her phone, the one where she was smiling on the beach in the Hamptons, and told him what he could. Her favorite bars, girlfriends, leaving times. Robert listened, nodding, without asking unnecessary questions. I'll call you when there's something, he said, standing up. And a piece of advice. Don't ask her anything until I'm done. Less chance of her noticing. Okay, James stood up, feeling a weight on his shoulders. Thank you. He went outside, where the wind hit him in the face, and stopped, looking at the passing cars. He hired a detective behind his wife's back. This is not how he imagined the future. The next evening, Robert began surveillance. James sat at home pretending everything was normal while Emily got ready to date Kate. She left at 8 o'clock, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, giving him another casual, "Don't wait up." He nodded, but as soon as the door closed, he texted Robert. She left. Robert replied, right there, following. Jane stayed with the children, reading Liam a story while Sophie slept, but his thoughts were with Emily where she was, with whom, what he would find out. This was the point of no return. The rain pattered on the roof of the Bright Horizon office, drowning out the roar of the city outside as James sat at his desk, staring at his phone. It had been a week since he hired Robert Kane, and each day felt like an eternity. Emily behaved as usual, leaving in the evenings, returning late, throwing out excuses like, I was with Kate, or I stayed at the bar. He pretended to believe, following Robert's advice, but inside he was torn. Suspicions turned into a shadow that followed him everywhere in the office, at home, even in his dreams. In fact, he already felt and knew everything you need to be stupid, not to feel how your woman is moving away, and evidence is needed to simply push him to a serious decision. The phone vibrated and he jumped. Message from Robert. There is something to show. Come. Office, 6 p.m. James looked at his watch, 5:15. His heart began to pound, and he felt his palms become damp. This was the moment of truth that he had both awaited and feared. He grabbed his coat, said a short, I'll leave early to Tom, and went out into the rain without taking an umbrella. Robert's office on the Lower East Side looked just as dull as last time. Shabby furniture, the smell of coffee, stacks of papers. Robert was waiting for him at the table, laptop in front of him and a mug in his hand. His face was inscrutable, but something akin to sympathy flashed in his eyes. Hi, James said, brushing rain off his sleeves. What do you have? Sit down, Robert nodded to the chair opposite. It won't be easy. James sat up, feeling his throat tighten. He wanted to ask what exactly, but the words stuck. Robert turned the laptop screen towards him and pressed play. A video appeared on the screen, taken from a distance, but quite clear. New York at night, the facade of the Ludlow Hotel in the East Village is a trendy place with a neon sign and glass doors. The camera focused on the entrance, and after a few seconds he saw her, Emily. She was wearing the same leather jacket from last week, with her hair down and a smile he hadn't seen in months. A man walked next to her, tall, dark-haired, wearing jeans and a dark jacket. They laughed, he put his hand on her waist, and she didn't move away. James froze, feeling his blood run cold. The camera followed them inside, through the lobby, to the elevator. They entered, the doors closed, and the video switched to another angle, a hotel hallway, dimly lit, with a red carpet. Emily and the man got out of the elevator. He opened the room door with a key card, and they disappeared inside. The camera lingered on the closed door, and then the screen went dark. Robert paused the video and looked at James. "It was the day before yesterday," he said quietly. "They stayed there for 3 hours. We left at 2 in the morning." James was silent, looking at the black screen. James took the pictures. In one, Emily stood at the entrance to a hotel, laughing, her eyes sparkling. In another, she hugged a man in the lobby, her hand resting on his chest. The third showed them at the elevator. He whispered something in her ear, and she smiled. "Who is he?" James asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't know yet," Robert answered. "I can find out if you want. It will take a couple of days." "Find out," James said, clutching the photographs in his hand. "I want to know everything." Robert nodded, writing something down on his notepad. "Any more questions?" he asked. "No." James stood up. James returned home around 8. Emily was in the living room, sitting on the sofa with her phone, in her lounge clothes, as if nothing had happened. Liam and Sophie were already asleep. Maria had left. He threw the keys onto the table with a loud thud, and she looked up. "You're late," she said casually. "Job?" "No." He looked at her, feeling anger rising from the depths. "There was a person who was watching you." Her face turned pale, but she quickly pulled herself together. "What?" She laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "You're kidding, right?" "No." He took the photographs out of his coat pocket and threw them on the table in front of her. "This is not a joke." She froze, looking at the pictures. Her hand trembled as she took the one where she hugged the man in the lobby. "Have you hired a detective?" she asked quietly, without looking up. "Yes," he answered, "because you lied to me. Every evening, with girlfriends. Who is he, Emily?" She was silent, clutching the photo in her hand. Then she looked up, and in her eyes there was something between challenge and fear. "It's none of your business," she said finally. "Is it none of my business?" He stepped closer, his voice trembling with rage. "You are my wife. We have children. Are you sleeping with someone in a hotel, and it's none of my business?" "Yes, I slept with him," she shouted, standing up. "And what? Do you think I'm happy here? Do you think I can live in your cage?" "Cage." He hit the table with his fist. "This is how you try to break free." "Freedom," she snorted. "You control my every step. You wanted me to be the perfect wife, but I'm not, James. I'm bored. I need more." "More?" He looked at her, not believing his ears. "We have a family. Isn't that more?" "For you, yes." She threw the photo on the table. "For me, no. I'm suffocating here, and you don't even notice. And that's why you're cheating." He lowered his voice, but it was trembling. "How many times? How many were there? What difference does it make?" James stepped back, feeling the words cut deeper than a knife. He wanted to scream, to hit something, but instead he just looked at her. "You destroyed us," he said quietly. "Do you understand this? If you love freedom so much, why did you get married? Why did you give birth to children?" He turned away, unable to look at her. Anger gave way to emptiness, and he realized that this was the end. Later that night, he sat in his office, looking at the pictures scattered on the table. Emily went to bed, or pretended to, and he was left alone with the truth he couldn't deny. He called Tom. His voice was muffled. "You were right," he said when Tom picked up the phone. "She's cheating." "Damn," Tom breathed. "I'm sorry, old man. What now? I can't go on like this." He hung up and opened his laptop, starting to search for divorce lawyers. Robert's video was not just proof, it became the point of no return. The morning at the Bright Horizon office was gray, like the sky outside the windows, overcast with clouds. James sat at his desk, looking at the stack of papers his lawyer had brought in, divorce papers, neatly folded in a folder with his name and Emily's name on it. It had been a week since he saw Robert's video and confronted her, and it had been the hardest week of his life. They barely spoke, only short phrases about the children passed through Maria or notes on the kitchen table. He slept in the guest room, and she stayed in the bedroom, and each day the silence between them grew louder. He opened the folder, skimming the first lines. James Carter versus Emily Carter. Divorce. It was official, black and white, and yet it seemed unreal. He had signed the last page in the morning after a long night of deliberation, and now the documents awaited only her signature or a refusal that would lead to trial. James didn't know what to expect from her after that fight, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back. The phone on the table rang, breaking him out of his thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, but he picked up, hoping for a distraction. "James Carter," he said, his voice tired. "James, this is Linda Crawford." The voice on the other end was cold and businesslike. "We need to talk." He tensed, remembering her face at the office party, arrogant, irritated after an argument with Emily. He thought he had settled everything with an apology and a discount, but Linda's tone said otherwise. "Of course, Linda," he replied, trying to sound confident. "How can I help?" "I received interesting news," she said. "Rumors, to be more precise, about your wife and about what is happening in your family." James squeezed the phone tighter, feeling his blood run cold. "What rumors?" he asked, although he already guessed. "About her personal life." Linda paused, as if savoring the moment. "They say she's dating someone, and it got through to people in our industry. Do you understand what this looks like for Bright Horizon?" "This is personal, Linda," he said, trying to keep his voice level. "Not a business." "You're wrong," she objected. "When your wife publicly argues with me at your own event and then finds herself in the center of a scandal, it becomes a business. My company doesn't want to be associated with this mess." "Scandal?" He frowned. "Where did you get this from?" "People are talking, James." Her tone became sharper. "After that night at the office party, someone saw her with a man at the Ludlow. The photos were leaked online. Unofficially, of course, but enough for my partners to start asking questions." James closed his eyes, cursing himself for not seeing this coming. Robert's video was his personal nightmare, but he didn't think it would go beyond their home. Someone, maybe a hotel employee, maybe a random guest, filmed Emily and leaked the photos. The reputation he had built over the years was crumbling before his eyes. "Linda," he said, opening his eyes, "this will not affect our work. I guarantee it." "Your guarantees are already in question," she replied. "We are reviewing the contract. If we leave, it won't be just my choice. Other clients are whispering too." "Who?" he asked, feeling anger mixed with panic. "It's just rumors," she said. "But Pepsi and Nike could follow us if this gets out of hand. Think about it." She hung up, leaving him with his ears ringing. James threw the phone on the table and leaned back in his chair, looking at the folder with documents. Divorce was his decision, but now he realized that the consequences would be wider than he expected. Tom entered the office half an hour later with a worried face and a mug of coffee in his hand. "You look like you've been run over by a truck," he said, sitting down opposite her. "What's happening?" "Linda called," James answered, rubbing his temples. "Rumors about Emily reached her. She threatens to break the contract." "Damn," Tom breathed. "How did she know?" "Photo," James said. "Someone picked her up with that guy at the hotel. It's online." "Oh my God," Tom shook his head. "I thought this would stay between you two." "Me too." James stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the wet street below. "But now it's not just my problem. Clients may leave." "Linda, yes, she's a bitch," Tom said. "But Pepsi and Nike, they have been with us for years. I don't believe they'll run away because of gossip." "If it gets louder, they'll run away," James objected. "Reputation is everything, Tom. You said it yourself." Tom paused, then put the mug on the table. "What will you do?" he asked. "I filed for divorce," James said, turning to him. "I signed the papers in the morning." "Seriously?" Tom raised his eyebrows. "This is a step." "I have no choice," James replied. "She cheated. I can't live with this. And now business is also dragging down." I understand, Tom nodded. But clients, we need to come up with something. Calm them down. I'll try, James said, but I'll deal with her first. That evening, he returned home earlier than usual, deciding to talk to Emily face to face. She was in the living room playing blocks with Liam while Sophie lay in the playpen. When she saw him, she frowned. "You're early," she said without getting up. "Did something happen?" "Yes." He threw his coat on the sofa and took out a folder from his briefcase. "This is for you." He placed the documents on the table in front of her. She looked at them, then at him. "What is this?" she asked, although it was clear from her tone that she had guessed. "This is what you've been asking for the last few years, your long-awaited freedom and application for divorce," he said, crossing his arms. "I submitted today." Her face turned pale, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Are you serious?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he nodded. "After everything you've done, I don't see any other way out." "After what I did," she stood up, leaving Liam with the cubes. "And you? You hired a detective to spy on me. This is fine. It's normal when a wife cheats," he said coldly. "I saw you with him, Emily, and now others saw it." "Other?" she frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Photos on the internet," he replied. "Clients know. Linda Crawford called and threatened to leave. Pepsi and Nike may follow. You not only destroyed us, but also my business." She fell silent, looking at him. Then she laughed shortly, bitterly. "So that's the thing," she said. "Not me, not the children, but your business. Always him." "This is not just business." He stepped closer. "This is our life. But you decided that you didn't care." "I don't care," she looked into his eyes. "But I won't apologize for wanting to live. If you're filing for divorce, file. I'll sign." "Okay," he said, feeling something inside him breaking. "Then this is the end." She took the folder, opened it, and looked through the pages. Liam ran towards her, tugging at her pant leg. "Mom, play," he said. "Now, baby," she smiled at him, but the smile was strained. Then she looked at James. "What about the children?" "I want at least joint custody," he said. 50-50ths. They shouldn't suffer because of us." "I agree," she nodded, "but I won't leave their lives." "Me too," he replied. She closed the folder and placed it back on the table. "Then do what you want," she said, taking Liam into her arms. "I won't fight." She went into the nursery, and James remained standing, looking at the documents. It was a solution, but it brought no relief, only emptiness. The next day, he called Michael Reed of Pepsi, trying to assess the damage. "Michael, have you heard anything about the rumors?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes," Michael replied, his tone cautious. "Photo of your wife with someone. This is true." "We're getting a divorce," James said. "This is personal, not business. I can assure you that Bright Horizon remains on top." "I hope so," said Michael, "but people talk. We're with you for now, but keep it under control." The conversation with Nike was similar polite assurances, but with a hint of doubt. James knew he would have to work twice as hard to keep them. The reputational damage was real, and Emily, even leaving his life, left a mark. Faint morning light filtered through the windows of a Tribeca apartment, reflecting off the boxes piled by the front door. James stood in the living room, holding a mug of cold coffee, and watched Emily gather the last of her things. The divorce was officially finalized last week. The court approved 50-50 joint custody, and she was to move into a small West Village apartment she rented through a friend. Liam and Sophie slept in their rooms, unaware that today their world would change forever. Emily walked past him with her suitcase, her steps fast, almost hurried. She was wearing jeans and a loose shirt, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, just a woman walking away. "This is all?" James asked, nodding towards the suitcase. "Almost," she answered, without looking at him. "I'll pick up the rest later. Kate will help with the furniture." "Okay," he took a sip of coffee, although it was already bitter. "When will you tell the children?" "Today." She put the suitcase by the door and turned to him. "After breakfast. I don't want to wake them up now." "Okay," he nodded. They will ask why you are leaving. I'll explain, she said, crossing her arms. I'll say that you and I decided to live separately, but I will always be their mother. Will you? He looked into her eyes, and a shadow of doubt flashed in his voice. Yes, James, she frowned. I won't disappear from their lives. We agreed on 50/50ths, and I will do it. He wanted to believe, but after everything betrayal, quarrels, her leaving the words sounded empty. He simply nodded without arguing. Then see you later, he said, putting the mug on the table. Good luck with the move. She looked at him as if she was about to say something, but changed her mind. Instead, she took her suitcase and left, quietly closing the door. James was left alone, listening to the echo of her footsteps dissolving into the corridor. The kids woke up an hour later, and he made them breakfast oatmeal with berries for Liam, mashed bananas for Sophie. Emily returned as promised to say goodbye. She sat down with them at the table, holding Sophie in her lap, while Liam picked at his plate with a spoon. Guys, she began, smiling, but the smile was strained. Mom is moving to a new apartment. It's not far, and you will come to me, and I will come to you. Dad and I will now live separately, but we love you, and that won't change. Liam looked at her, his big eyes full of questions. Why won't you live with us? He asked. Sometimes adults decide it's better this way, she said, stroking his head. But I will always be your mother, baby. And Sophie, too. Will you come tomorrow? He bowed his head. Soon, she kissed his forehead. I'll have my own week with you, and we'll have fun. Sophie whimpered, and Emily handed it to James as she stood up. I have to go, she said, looking at him. I'll call you in the evening. Okay? He nodded, holding Sophie in his arms. Take care of yourself. She left again, and Liam ran to the window, watching her car drive away. James looked at him, feeling a lump in his throat, but forced himself to smile. Everything will be fine, son, he said. We can handle it. The first week without Emily was his. He stayed in the apartment with the children, deciding that stability was what they needed. But reality hit quickly. Liam woke up at night calling for his mother, and Sophie cried more often than usual, as if sensing a change. Maria helped during the day, but in the evening he was alone, and it was a test. He learned to cook dinner with one hand while rocking Sophie with the other, and read stories to Liam even when his eyes were drooping with exhaustion. A week later, it was time for her custody. James called her this morning to make arrangements. Emily, he said when she picked up the phone, what time should I expect you? Oh, her voice was distracted. Today it won't work. Kate's having a party. I promised to help. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow. He frowned, looking at Liam, who was building a tower of blocks. I know, she sighed, but this is unexpected. I'll pick them up tomorrow evening, I promise. Okay? He clenched his jaw. But don't let them down, they are bored, and they need their mother. She hung up and James looked at Liam. Mom will come tomorrow, he said, trying to sound cheerful. Today you and I will have fun. Okay, Liam nodded, but his voice was quiet. Tomorrow came, but Emily called again. James, she said, I have a meeting with a real estate agent. New apartment details need to be sorted out. Let's go on Wednesday. Emily, he raised his voice, but restrained himself when he noticed Sophie looking at him from the playpen. This is the second time. Children ask about you. I'll come, she said sharply, just not today. I have things to do. Are things more important than children? He asked, unable to resist. Don't start, she snorted. I'm not disappearing. Just busy. She hung up and James stood there, feeling anger mixed with disappointment. He walked over to Liam, who was drawing on the floor. Mom is busy, he said, sitting down next to her. But you and I will make pizza. Would you like? Yes, Liam smiled, and James realized that he needed to do everything so that the children did not feel empty. Another week passed, and it was her turn again. This time she came for an hour to pick up the children, but returned them in the evening of the same day. I have a trip tomorrow, she said, standing in the doorway, with friends in Connecticut. I can't take them with me. Emily, he looked at her, holding Sophie in his arms. You promised to be in their lives. What's happening? I'm in their life, she crossed her arms. But I have a life too, James. I can't give up on everything. This is not everything, he said coldly. These are your children, and they are not toys to take only when it is convenient and interesting for you. I'll pick them up next week, she turned away. I promise. She left and James closed the door, feeling her promises become increasingly empty. Liam ran up to him. Mom will come back? He asked. Yes, son, James lied, hugging him close. She'll be back. But he knew that this was not so. Emily was leaving not only the home, but also their lives, leaving him alone with two children who needed stability. James learned to be a single father as he went. He cut his office hours, giving Tom more meetings, and spent the evenings with Liam and Sophie. He mastered braiding Sophie's hair awkward, but she laughed and learned how to make chicken nuggets, which Liam loved. On weekends, they went to Central Park, where Liam chased pigeons and Sophie slept in the stroller. It was a new routine, hard but familiar. One night, as he was putting Liam to bed, he heard the question he had been dreading. Dad, why doesn't Mom come? Liam looked at him from under the blanket. James sat on the edge of the bed, searching for words. Mom is very busy, he said softly, but I'm here and Sophie is here. We're a team, right? Yes, Liam nodded, but his eyes were sad. I miss her. I know you, James stroked his head. Honestly, I probably do too, but we can handle it. Liam fell asleep, and James went out into the living room, feeling heavy in his heart, but not for himself, but for the children. The morning at the Bright Horizon office began with the smell of freshly brewed espresso and the noise of voices behind the glass walls of the conference room. James stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, sketching out a new advertising campaign for Greenwave, an environmental startup that promised to be the next big name in the sustainability industry. 3 months have passed since Emily left home, and life has settled into a new rhythm: children, work, endless attempts to keep everything under control. He was exhausted, but today he felt a spark that he hadn't felt in a long time. This campaign could restore the agency's reputation after the rumors and the departure of Linda Crawford. So, he said, turning to the team gathered around the table, Greenwave wants not just advertising, but a story. We focus on emotions, family, future, planet. No boring statistics, just what catches you. Tom, sitting in the corner with a mug of coffee, nodded. Sounds cool, he said, but we need a fresh look. Someone who sees it differently than we do. I agree, James erased the line on the board and wrote new talent. That's why I brought in an external marketer. She will start today. Tom narrowed his eyes with a smile. Interesting. Claire Davis, James explained, ignoring the subtext. Worked with Patagonia and Tesla. Her ideas are what we need. The door to the conference room opened and a woman walked in with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. She was wearing a simple gray suit, but something about her posture spoke of confidence. She held the laptop in her hands and smiled, tilting her head slightly. I hope I'm not late, she said, her voice soft but clear. Claire Davis, nice to meet you. James Carter, he extended his hand, and she shook it firmly, but without unnecessary pressure. Welcome. This is Tom, my partner, and our team. Hi, Tom waved his hand. I heard that you worked with big names. It was a thing. Claire put the laptop on the table and opened it. But I'm not here for the resume. Greenwave is my type of project. Let's get started. James nodded, feeling slightly relieved. She was straightforward, no fuss, just what he needed right now. The first meeting with Claire went better than he expected. She came up with a campaign concept, short videos of real families using Greenwave products, solar panels, recycled materials, eco-friendly toys. No actors, just the truth captured on camera. People are tired of gloss, she said, showing a slide with rough engagement statistics. They want to see themselves. If we do it honestly, they will believe it. I like it, James said, crossing his arms. But how do we stand out? Eco-trend is everywhere now. Through the children, Claire answered, looking into his eyes. We'll show how these products change their future. Not parents, but children. Liam and Sophie would have loved it if they were in the picture. He froze when he heard the names of his children. How do you know their names? He asked, frowning. Tom mentioned it. She smiled, slightly embarrassed. He said you have two, and I thought that was a good example. Sorry if I went overboard. No, he shook his head, relaxing. Everything is fine. Just unexpected. Claire has an eye for detail. Tom winked. This is her superpower. Then we'll use it, James said, getting back to business. Let's start with the pilot video. Claire, will you and the team work through the script? Already on it, she nodded, making a note in her laptop. The meeting ended, and James felt that for the first time in a long time, work brought him joy again. Over the next few days, he and Claire worked side by side. She'd show up at the office at 9, coffee in hand and ideas that made him rethink his approach. They sat in his office discussing shots or went to meetings with Greenwave to finalize details. Claire was not like Emily, calm, focused, with a dry humor that came through at unexpected moments. One evening, they stayed late editing the first draft of the video. On the laptop screen, a boy of about 8 was installing a solar panel with his father, smiling at the camera. Too staged, Claire said, leaning back in her chair. He looks like something out of a toothpaste commercial. You're right, James grinned, looking at the screen. We need more dirt. Let him fall or break something. Oh yes, she nodded, making a note. Nothing says eco better than a broken panel. He looked at her, and the corners of his lips twitched. She caught his eye and narrowed her eyes. What? She asked. You're funny, he said, and he was surprised at how easily it came out. I'm trying, she smiled, but not flirtatiously, but simply. You can too, if you want. I'm not sure, he shook his head, but the smile remained. It's been no laughing matter lately. I understand, she closed the laptop, looking at him more seriously. Tom told me. Divorce, children. It's hard. Yes, he nodded, feeling the tension return. Emily left 3 months ago. I'm alone with Liam and Sophie. She promised to be there, but she's always gone. It's her loss, Claire said quietly. Not yours. He looked at her, and something in her voice, the calm confidence, made him feel lighter. He didn't answer, but for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to withdraw into himself. Let's finish this tomorrow, he said, standing up. It's already late. We agreed. She collected her things. Good night, James. Good night, he replied, and when she left, he realized that he was still smiling. A week later, they premiered the pilot video for Greenwave. The clients were delighted. The boy, now with dirty hands and a sincere smile, talked about how he wanted to save the planet for his friends. James and Claire stood to the side, watching the team clap. We did it, she said, nudging him. Are you satisfied? Very, he nodded. You were right about the children. I'm always right, she winked, and he laughed, briefly but sincerely. It was the first time he had laughed since his divorce, and the sound surprised him. Claire looked at him with slight surprise, then smiled wider. You see, she said, you still can. Maybe I can, he shrugged, but something shifted inside. They left the office together, heading towards the elevator. It was cool outside, and she pulled on a scarf. Do you have plans for the evening? She asked casually. Children, he answered. Liam wants pizza, and Sophie will probably draw on my shirt. Sounds like a perfect evening, she said, smiling. I only have a cat and Netflix. The cat is serious, he grinned. What's your name? Oliver, she answered. Fat and lazy. Do you want a photo? Of course, he said, and she took out her phone, showing a photo of a ginger cat lounging on the sofa. Handsome, he nodded. Liam would hook him up. Bring him over sometime, she said, putting the phone away. Oliver loves guests. We'll see, he replied, and it wasn't just politeness. They said goodbye at the subway, and James walked to the car, feeling the warmth of their conversation staying with him. At home, he made pizza with Liam, laughing when he dropped the cheese on the floor, and for the first time in months, he didn't think about Emily. James woke up to the phone ringing at 7 in the morning. Spring break started this week, and Liam and Sophie were home. School and daycare were closed until Monday. He hoped to leave them with Maria, but the nanny's voice on the phone ruined his plans. "James, this is Maria," she said, coughing. "I got the flu. I can't come today." "Get well," he replied, sitting up in bed. "I'll think of something." He threw the phone on the nightstand and sighed. Today was Friday, and Emily was scheduled to pick up the kids at 8, her custodial week. But after 5 months since the divorce, she hardly appeared, always citing business. James dialed her number. Beeps, answering machine. "Emily," he said. "Maria is sick. I need to go to the office. You can pick up the kids on time. It's your week. Call." There was no answer. He woke up Liam and Sophie. Liam, 7.5, grumbled as he hid under the covers, and 5-year-old Sophie immediately asked for yogurt. James made them breakfast porridge for Liam, yogurt for Sophie, but by 8:30 Emily still hadn't called. He tried again. Silence. "Dad, is Mom coming?" Liam asked, drawing a car on a napkin. "Not today," James replied, hiding his irritation. "She's busy. Will you come with me to the office?" "Yes." Liam jumped up. "Are there cookies?" "Yes," James smiled. "Get ready." He gathered their things, Liam's backpack with toys, Sophie's bag with food and spare clothes, and took them to Bright Horizon. It wasn't the best plan, but there was no choice left. The office was noisy calls, conversations, clattering keys. James walked holding Liam's hand and carried Sophie on his shoulder with her stuffed bunny. The employees smiled, but he saw their surprise. Tom met him at the elevator. "Children in the office?" he asked, looking at Sophie. "Maria is sick. Emily didn't come," James explained. "It's vacation, and I have to work." "Her again," Tom shook his head. "Okay, let's put them in your office. I have an iPad." "Thank you," James said, leading the children along. In the office, Liam climbed into a chair, and Sophie sat on the floor with toys. James played a cartoon for them, but knew it wouldn't last long. At 9:45, Claire came in with coffee and a folder. When she saw the children, she stopped. "Hello," she said, smiling. "Who is this?" "Liam and Sophie," James answered. "The nanny got sick and didn't pick Emily up. I had to take them here." "I see." Claire put the coffee on the table and looked at Liam. "Hello, Liam. Are you in charge here?" "No, Dad," Liam laughed. "But I can help." "Cool," she said, then sat down next to Sophie. "Who are you?" "Sophie," the girl answered, showing the hair. "This is Bunny." "Good Bunny." Claire took the toy. "Soft. Did you choose it yourself?" "Yes, with Dad." Sophie nodded. "Dad, well done." Claire smiled at James. "We have a meeting with Greenwave soon. What to do?" "I don't know," he sighed. "I thought I'd leave them here, but—" "We'll take it with us," Claire suggested. "They will fit into the theme." "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," she nodded. "It will be fun." "Thank you," James said, feeling grateful. The meeting took place in a large hall. Evan and Sarah from Greenwave watched the new campaign videos while James spoke. Liam was drawing on paper and Sophie was sitting next to Claire, playing with her bracelet. Claire whispered something to her and Sophie laughed quietly. "We want more social media," James said, showing the slide. "Short videos with children. It works." "Great idea," Sarah said, looking at Sophie. "Are these yours?" "Yes," James replied. "Liam and Sophie." "Cute," Evan smiled. "Maybe we can take them off." "I want to," Liam shouted, holding up the drawing. "Here's my car." Everyone laughed and Claire looked at Sophie. "And you?" she asked. "Yes," Sophie clapped her hands. "Looks like we have stars," Claire said, looking at James. "Apparently, yes," he smiled. Greenwave approved the plan and Evan shook Liam's hand, calling him assistant. After the meeting, James approached Claire. "You saved the day," he said. "Thank you." "They're great," she replied, looking at Sophie. "It was easy." "You're good with them," he remarked. "I have nephews," she said. I'm used to it. The day continued in the office. Claire helped Liam build a file tower while James worked. Sophie fell asleep on the sofa under his jacket. Liam suddenly asked, "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" James froze and Claire laughed. "No," she said, "I work with him." "But you're cool," Liam said. "Mom is not like that." "Liam," James began, but Claire waved her hand. "It's okay," she said. "Thank you, Liam." Liam returned to the files and James caught Claire's eye. She smiled and he felt warm. In the evening, Sophie woke up and reached out to Claire. "Will you come again?" she asked. "If Dad calls," Claire answered, stroking her head. "Dad, call me," Sophie said, and Liam added, "Yes, Dad, maybe," James said, smiling. They walked out together and Claire helped carry their things to the car. In parting, she said to Liam, "Take care of Dad." "Okay," Liam nodded. James put the children in the car, watched Claire leave, and smiled. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.